Howdy, welcome back. I'm Steven, and this is FWP Reviews. Bad news. I know I said we'd be back in the good space, but we're not. Maybe next week. My schedule has been busy and my motivation has relatedly been a little bit low, so last week's video fell through. Because the month of October is looking like such a big month for movies, I'm incredibly excited and invigorated, and I feel like this will be something new and a great change of pace. Today, though, we're talking about all of the 2021 movies I saw in this September. Without further ado, I present the good, the bad, and the mediocre of September 2021. This month had very few actual big studio releases, really capping it out with Shang-Chi at the very beginning of the month. But what some of these releases proved is that a strictly theatrical run will be beneficial and profitable for those studios. It's enabled this month of October that was already supposed to be stacked to remain that way and to not have any further delays. This month had a couple of highs, but not very many, and it had a few lows, not very many. It was mostly a really mediocre month overall. But it has helped set up what could be one of the best Octobers in history. Let's take a look at the first movie I saw this month. This month started out big with Marvel's Shang-Chi. With the help of some extremely entertaining performances, some excellent jokes, and an overall riveting palette of action, this movie manages to overcome its more minor flaws. It came at a time and helped prove this strictly theatrical run is the way to go for the future, at least for right now and how the situation is. So hopefully this uptick in the box office created by Shang-Chi will allow this month of October and November and December to be even better. Despite this, I did have some qualms with the more Marvel-style elements of this movie. The villain really just felt kind of overall, and a lot of the visuals in the finale were hideous, to say the least. It is definitely one of the better origin movies we have received, but it's not the best. However, many things, including the importance of what this movie kind of stands for, allows this movie to become a pretty good movie overall. Why did they make this movie? There have been good and bad takes of live-action Cinderella. There have been good animated takes, obviously. But we don't need any more. There have been so many. This, simply put, is not a story that needed a modern-day revamp. There were some decent musical performances in this movie, but ultimately there should have been original music written at the very least. This movie is simultaneously one of the weirdest and the worst products to come out of this year. In terms of the lead performance, Camila Cabello isn't as bad as Addison Rae, but she still shouldn't be acting like this, right? In Afterlife of the Party, the main selling point is getting to see Victoria Justice in an actual decent movie for once. This movie borrows a lot from other types of movies thematically and narratively, and that can hinder it at times. However, it does manage to blend the many stories that it sort of draws from into a fresh and enjoyable sort of movie as a whole. Overall, it was a solid movie. Worth is a decent historical drama. It feels a bit Oscar baity, but just not necessarily that good. It takes advantage of the naturally compelling storyline that it has, and it makes a well-paced and generally investing story overall. It manages to cast the right blame about what happened in 9/11 without tattering or trying to step on the memory of the people that did the right thing that day. Undyne, or however you say it, is a modern retelling of an old myth. This movie sort of oozes tension at most points throughout the narrative. This tension does manage to satisfyingly and effectively boil over into a really cool finale. However, this movie is not even a bit, but is a lot on the slow side. It turns out to be average and pretty good overall, but I don't think I'll ever revisit the movie. Another decent but mostly bland movie I saw back-to-back with Undyne was Before, During, After. This movie manages to navigate its treacherous subject matter and effectively portray what's going on to the viewer. However, despite its very short runtime, it still feels like it drags on forever and ever. The card counter has many flaws, but I can look past most of them because they're so minor. This movie manages to make something visually, emotionally, and mentally involving almost all the way through the movie. It can get a bit heavy-handed, but the dark and twisting path this movie takes the viewer on is more than worthwhile. I enjoyed almost everything about this movie, and I really enjoyed the variety of the scenes that we got to see. The story being told is naturally strong, but there are certain complexities and takes in the movie that deal with morality and the grayness of it that allow for this to probably become one of the better movies that I see this year. The Voyeurs is weird. It doesn't deliver anything near where it should, but at least it's hot, right? You'd be wrong. Most of the sexual parts of this sexual thriller actually just feel weird and misplaced, and they feel like they're put in as this shiny, ooh, look at this, don't look at the story. And it's designed to be distracting, but it doesn't really work that well, does it? Weird movie. The more notable YouTube reviewer Chris Stuckman pointed out that Malignant is sort of the embodiment of camp and is one of the first movies we've gotten like this in a while, and it kind of hit the nail on the head for me. While I wouldn't give this movie a necessarily high rating, I still give it a passable rating because of just how enjoyable it can be. It has fun and effective scares that involve the viewer and get them invested in it, even though you can look at it and kind of laugh and enjoy it in a different way than you usually do. It makes it abundantly clear that the movie's not really taking itself all too seriously, so that it allows this sort of silliness and over-the-topness to be enjoyed rather than confusing. Small engine repair had me hooked until the final few moments of the movie. Undeniably, something about the first half of this movie just hits everything almost perfectly. The ragtag group of friends with excellent actors in place helps create this bond. It manages to capture the quintessentials about addiction, adulthood, and small-town living. It may waver in the end trying to get this sort of shock out of the viewer, but as a whole, it's really enjoyable to watch. Schumacher is the latest in a long line of racing documentaries we have received throughout the years. While this movie doesn't manage to even get close to what I deem the essential racing documentary cinema, Schumacher is still really enjoyable and really captures on the emotion and the star power of Michael Schumacher. It manages to capture a lot of the brilliance of this racer as how he sort of was a driving force behind why a lot of teams could push to the front when they weren't really there before. It gets a little weird when it's excessively praising him and then trying to walk back criticism on him as if it's all uncalled for, which it's really not. It tries to make excuses for his actions, which we don't need. We get that how he behaved on track was sometimes questionable. That doesn't tatter his legacy. And this documentary tries to walk back on that, and it kind of felt distasteful. A lot of the more compelling parts of this documentary came from seeing his family's testimony about him, and you sort of start to realize through this documentary, if you didn't already know, that not only was he plausibly one of the greatest racers of all time, he's also a family man at heart. This documentary helps sort of get to the bare bones of that. I think one of the most compelling moments of the movie was seeing Mick talk about how he just so badly wants to talk to his dad about motorsports now that Mick obviously races in Formula One and sort of understands that world and language. He says he feels like he could connect with his father even more now, but unfortunately that's not where he's at this point, and it's kind of sad and emotional, but it's interesting to see the sort of impact he's had on his family as well as the rest of the world. Blue Bayou is one of the better and more intriguing movies that I saw this month. It captures a beautiful but heartbreaking story about an immigrant who was adopted before he could even speak. Our character is now facing deportation due to a gap in the law and abuse of power that allows people in his situation to be deported, which is based off of a real-life problem that we're facing. The movie is a tragedy in many ways, and it lets you know that. The movie puts its hooks in the viewer at the very beginning and drags them along for this ride, even if they don't want to be there. The beauty of the dynamic between him and his family and him and the world are so compelling as a whole. We get to see the beauty and the tragedy unfold, and it's almost impossible to look away from. It has one of the most devastating finales I've seen in a movie in a while, and it works so effectively to emotionally and in the tragedy kind of way this movie unfolds in the movie and cap it off well. The knee-jerk reaction is to try and give Cry Macho a pass because it's Clint Eastwood behind the movie. I unfortunately could not give it a passing rating. It almost gets there, but it just doesn't get there for me. This movie does have strong, compelling, and emotional moments throughout. The movie sort of feels like this sweeping and emotional odyssey, but it fumbles the ball. It fumbles it hard. To no help for the movie, it is so fucking boring. It almost put me to sleep on multiple occasions. Cop Shop is one of those movies that if you let yourself be along for the ride, you are sure to have a great time. This plot is nothing more than paper-thin Swiss cheese with holes galore. Logic, it's left the building. However, it's damn fun to watch. The violence and the jokes, as well as the pretty incredible cast as a whole, all really work well together to make this sort of well-blended, entertaining dumpster fire. It's so many bad things and good things at once that somehow the good things just overpower in such a surprising way. It's not good, but I give it a passing rating because it's so damn enjoyable. Nightbooks was surprisingly good and surprisingly scary for a kid's horror movie. It gets a little bit goofy at times, but that's forgivable because it's a kid's movie. I was incredibly impressed with the scares and the performances this movie is able to put forth. It hooked me in and it had me along for this weird ride. Everybody's talking about Jamie as the newest in a long line of modern-day musical movie adaptations. This movie does manage to effectively capture the viewer's heart despite some glaring inconsistencies in its story and themes. It doesn't always make sense, but the music and the performances are just good enough to make this a bearable movie. Prisoners of the Ghostland is yet another movie starring the legendary Nick Cage. To be frank, this movie is somehow weirder than the other movies he's been in this year, and he was in Willy's Wonderland, so I don't know what this man's doing anymore, but I'm kind of here for it. This movie has such an odd atmosphere to it, it almost feels like Mad Max. It's entertaining in a violent and humorous way such that the mystery and intrigue of the movie are so enamoring and they keep you locked in to find out what's going on because, man, there's a lot of weird shit going on in this movie. Together is a movie about COVID that doesn't want to make you stop living immediately. It works in these long, extended sort of monologues that work not only as movie bits, but as sort of effective commentary on the situation that doesn't always get under my skin. It lets the two talented stars that are leading the movie sort of take the reins, and it uses clever delivering techniques to deliver the movie in a way that's more than what it could have been if somebody didn't get behind the camera and go, we're going to make this actually investable and you're going to actually have the viewer want to watch it. This event has sort of affected us all, but it's affected us all in different ways, and this movie manages to capture that. It gets a bit preachy and over the top, but that can be partially overlooked for the fact that it doesn't make me want to die like all the other movies that have involved COVID at all. Birds of Paradise was almost something that could have been good, but the weirdness of it took me so far out of it. I think this movie could improve upon a rewatch, but it's hard to say if I'd ever bring myself to rewatch it. This movie borrows many elements from other movies and it manages to blend those effectively. The narrative just loses me along the way a little bit because it's generic, weird, and over the top. There's also a clear priority for the movie to prioritize stylization over substance, and the movie could have done both, but it just decided to do one instead, which is just dumb. An incredibly mediocre month for movies would not be complete without a mediocre documentary. Mushy and the Wolves is just that. This movie is weird because it manages to make this long and arduous story actually concise, compelling, and to the point, but it is so unspectacular and lacking in life that it's just not involving at all emotionally or mentally. PVT Chat ignores trying to make effective commentary. It just wants to make a horny movie, and it uses the guise of effective movie commentary to get to make a horny movie. And for some reason, there were two of those this month, and I just want to know why. Why? With that wraps up the mediocre month of September. With large releases filling every weekend in October, let's hope that there's a more spectacular month ahead. Until next time, follow my Instagram at FWPReviews100 for daily written reviews about the newest movies. With that, this is FWP Reviews signing off. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one.